Today we're going to be talking about the efforts for Ebola vaccination in the Democratic Republic of the Congo from 2018 to 2020, surrounding the second largest Ebola epidemic in the world. The Zaire strain of Ebola virus originated from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and was first discovered near the Ebola River in 1976. This strain has a mortality rate that varies from 60% to 90%, making it the deadliest Ebola virus strain. The virus is spread through contact with infected animals or the bodily fluids of someone who is infected. About 8 to 10 days after exposure, symptoms first appear, initially including flu-like symptoms of fatigue, headache, fever, and muscle pain. Soon after, more serious symptoms occur, such as diarrhea, vomiting, and internal bleeding, commonly causing death. If a person survives the virus, they commonly suffer from symptoms like vision problems, difficulty sleeping, and memory loss for up to 2 years after infection. After years of Ebola virus infecting populations of unprotected people, these debilitating symptoms motivated pharmaceutical companies to look for a treatment.
In 2014, as a result of an earlier Ebola virus outbreak, Merck began the development of the V920, otherwise known as the ERVEBO Zaire Ebola virus vaccine. This vaccine obtained FDA approval in December of 2019, after pre-approval from the World Health Organization in November of that same year. This particular Zaire Ebola vaccine is a live recombinant vaccine. It works by taking the gene that codes for the glycoproteins of the Zaire Ebola virus and inserting that gene into a virus called the vesicular stomatitis virus, or the VSV. This virus is not harmful towards humans, making it an effective vector for the vaccine. After the vaccine is administered, the body is able to recognize the Ebola virus proteins for the future, thus granting immunity. One shortcoming of this vaccine is that it only provides protection against the Zaire Ebola virus. The ERVEBO vaccine was administered using a ring vaccination strategy, meaning it was only given to those who are at risk of contracting the virus, such as healthcare workers and people who are directly exposed to the virus, with an emphasis placed on its use during outbreaks. This strategy is analogous to the strategy used in smallpox eradication. The legitimacy of this vaccine was undermined by the fear of flu-like side effects produced by the vaccine and by rumors that the vaccine was an elaborate scheme designed by the government to either make money or eradicate the Congolese people. Additionally, Johnson & Johnson have developed a new experimental vaccine that would be administered in 2 doses. While it is proven that the vaccine provides immunity, it is still unknown whether it will be effective in the event of a large outbreak.
In 2018, the Democratic Republic of the Congo experienced the second largest outbreak of Ebola virus in the world's history. The outbreak began in an eastern province of the country called North Kivu, causing a total of 3,470 cases, of which 2,287 resulted in death. This equates to approximately a 66% mortality rate. This area had a history of violence prior to the outbreak, characterized by a rebel group called the Allied Democratic Forces continuously attacking the general public. In the midst of the outbreak, responders from the capital city of Kinshasa were brought to North Kivu, where they began receiving salaries much higher than local workers. These circumstances exacerbated the negative effects of the outbreak as they prevented aid from reaching the people most at risk.
With the sudden surge in foreign intervention coming to the DRC and massive fundings and workers attempting to aid in vaccinating the people in order to prevent the outbreak from getting worse, the local population were having other thoughts about the situation. With the previous incompetence of aid from previous events, such as the attacks on locals from the Allied Democratic Forces, distrust in their government was brewing due to the lack of protection. But this also extended to the UN for failing to execute sufficient aid with their massive peacekeeping policy. Now, onto the policies of compassionate use, the introduction of 2 experimental vaccines, and ring vaccination. The people were quite suspicious of the vaccine and the intentions behind it. They were worrying about if it was actually meant to continue the perpetuation of the disease for profit, or if they were just being unjustly experimented on. They then believed that the healthcare workers were only trying to protect themselves as well, because of the ring vaccination policy prioritizing workers and those in recent direct contact with the infected first, rather than just the general public. This is compounded with the poor living conditions and underfunded services, contrasting the massive funding for the vaccination effort being approximately $1.2 billion, making people feel like they were only being paid attention to because other nations were fearing the spread of the outbreak to their own nations. Despite the sheer amount of conflict originating from abroad, there's also more internally.
So on top of distrust in foreign aid, there was also growing distrust towards the DRC's own government. The Ebola epidemic started during an election year, and the sitting president, Joseph Kabila, ended up postponing the elections from 2016 to December 2018. A lot of Congolese people saw this as an attempt to hold on to power and using the epidemic as a political invention, especially since there was significant local support for opposing candidate Martin Fayulu from endemic areas. This power move gave the impression that the current government was trying to silence the voices of those who supported the opposing candidate, worsening the government's relations with the public. Additionally, there was skepticism around Kinshasa elites and health workers only coming to endemic areas to collect foreign aid money and profit at the expense of less wealthy populations. The locals conspired that the responders would work to prolong the outbreak in order to make more money, and even that the Ebola virus was created by the Kinshasa elites as a way to earn more profit.
The root issues that lead to epidemics of diseases such as Ebola are extremely prevalent in countries such as the Congo, like a lack of clean water, lack of sanitation, underfunded healthcare systems, lack of public education, and poor living conditions, which have not been addressed by the world at large. Ebola has affected these countries for 40 years, and only when the threat of a pandemic arises do world leaders decide to step in and help these countries with production and release of vaccinations. The lack of empathy for these countries can be well summarized by a young man from Majengo working as a security guard who summarized local sentiment in responding to a question about health priorities in the region by saying, "Look at how the whole republic and the whole world mobilized for the Ebola response. But when you come back to the massacres that are happening here, no one is interested." This leaves much work to be done in countries in Africa to improve their health and quality of life.